Alright, our GSR 4 final drive transmission. Due to the good response and everyone liking the video that we did about the suck gear ratio, we figured we'll do the same for the B series. Not because there's confusion, but more so on like they focus on the 4.7 final drive and 4.4 final drive. Not really the ratio or which one is better or what's worse. And of course, we will talk about my intake and that we did on this video before, and we'll talk more about it and show you why engine efficiency is quite important, or the most important thing to consider when you're talking about gear ratios or planning on what to run or use to get better lap times. This is our GSR 4.4, but let's get right into the matter. The Type R 4.4 and the Type R 4.7 tranny. With the 4.7 being more expensive on the market, but its fourth and fifth gear is actually farther apart, so it isn't any closer ratio than the Type R 4.4. So are you just paying extra for the final drive, or is it worth it? Now let's calculate. Let's head up to Zealautowerks, alright? Let's go. And then we go to the transmission, alright? And then we scroll down, alright? So to be more accurate, we have to choose the proper tires that we run. So it's 195, 55 series, alright? And then, 9,000 RPM because, we're racers. Just kidding. All right, then let's choose the 95, 97 ITR. All right, there. You can see it's 4.4. So on this other one, we go with 95 and then 55 series and then 9,000 RPM. All right. Now, if you check here, you can see the gear ratios, and then also the first and second and third and even fourth and fifth gear. Okay, now let's look for the 98 2000 ITR. See, it's 4.4 and 4.7, so that's the difference. Now when you look at the first three gears, the first, second, and third, they're all identical, right? So the miles per hour on the 4.7 is shorter. But look at the fourth and fifth. They're spread out, you know. That's because Honda was smart enough to actually spread out the gears of the 4.7 so that on the highway it matches the 4.4. Maybe not identical, but really, really close. Like, look at that. On the miles per hour, it's really identical or close enough, right? This way, when you're on the highway, when you're using the 4.7, it's not so significantly different, right? But I've tried the 4.4 and put a 4.7 final drive. It wasn't so bad. Maybe you just raised maybe 400 or 500 RPMs on the highway, which is tolerable. Now let's look at the ITR gear ratio. As you can see here, we're shifting at 9,000 RPM. And the first gear, when you finish the first gear, you top at 44.18 miles per hour. That's the trap speed on the first gear. And this matters, and we'll explain it a little later. Now look at third gear, it's 1.45. And the fourth gear is 1.1. So we're going to show you the 4.7 version. Now look at the fourth gear. It's 1.03. On the ITR 4.4 is 1.1. So hey, this is farther apart. So the 4.4 97 ITR is a lot closer gear in ratio. So think about it. Are you buying just the 4.7 transmission or final drive? because the 95, 97 ITR is closer gear in ratio than the 47. Okay, now on to the Mfactory calculator because it shows the RPM. So when you shift into second gear, it's 584, and then on third gear, it's 6250. And fourth gear, it's 6840. All right, now let's go to the dynograph. And this will show you that the dynograph or dyno sheet is not all about the horsepower or just the horsepower. You have to study and understand the graph really well in order for you to go faster or run better lap times. Alright, now let's use this dyno sheet for example. Okay, it made 224 wheel horsepower and 152.7 feet-pounds torque. Alright, the peak power is around 8.5, as you can see here, right? Okay, this is to show you guys how secondary importance, how much power it made, because the more important thing is the graph shape. Here we go. Alright, now let's say we shift at 9,000 RPM. And you remember this? Second gear picks up at 5840. So now here, that's 5840. But when you look at the graph, that's probably around 150 or 155 wheel horsepower. That's a weak point, right? Okay, but let's continue. Okay, on your third gear, it's 6,250 RPM. So that's here. Okay, and if you look at it, it's pretty good. I mean, it's on the good torque range and power range. So let's go to the next. And on fourth gear, you come in at 6,840 RPM. Here on the graph, and you can see it starts to, it's gonna pull really good in the quarter mile because you're in the meat of the power band. So now here, remember the 47 ITR tranny has 1.03 fourth gear and 1.1 on the 4.4, right? And here's Mfactory. And you can see here on fourth gear, it's 6,380, not 6,840. So that's far apart. So if you look here, that's probably around 174 wheel horsepower compared to the 4.4 ITR fourth gear. All right, now let's go back. You can see 6840 RPM, right? And here on the dynograph, it's around maybe 180 or 185 wheel horsepower when it picks up fourth gear. That's really, really strong, and that's what makes it go fast. So when you think about it, that's how important dynographs are, or dyno sheets. Not just the numbers, but the graph, the curve, and the shape. And also later we'll talk about my intake design on my car, and we'll show you a lot of details on all the stuff that we did. This is a personal test. And now we go to the 4.7 transmission, and you can see the fourth gear is 1.03, and if you go back to the Mfactory, it picks up at 6,380 RPM. So here it is. Look, it's probably around 175 or 178 wheel horsepower. That is not as good, right? And now we go back to the ITR. It's 1.1 on the fourth gear, which picks up at 6,840 RPM. Here, look. And that's around 180 to 185 wheel horsepower. And we both know which fourth gear pulls harder, right? And oh, I mean ITR 4.4. Sorry. Now going back to this, you can see that at 9,000 RPM, we shift the first gear gets to 44.18 miles per hour. That's about 70 kilometers per hour. And that's a big deal when you think about it, because that's vehicle speed we're talking about. And the higher it is, the lesser the spin you get on second gear. And here you can see when you shift it at 9,500 RPM, it's 46.63 miles per hour, which is around almost 75 kilometers per hour, which is a big deal if you drive and you know the speed in second gear. And we check with the Mfactory calculator, and it says 6,240 RPM. So here it is. And you can see if you shift higher, you carry over the power to second gear a lot better. And that's with the benefit of higher trap speed on first gear. So it kind of works, right? But it's always different from each driver. Now, before we delve into volumetric efficiency and how or why we always mention it when we talk about our intake setup, like and comment if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you haven't. Alright, now look at this. After the peak power, it carries good, right? That's because the induction and the exhaust is very efficient, as well as the cam and compression. Because if not, then power is going to go down like that, as well as torque. And so when you think about it, shifting at 9,000 RPM may actually slow you down. And even look at the B18c that we did, the stock block. But look, 211 wheel horsepower, and it's almost near 10,000 RPM. So, volumetric efficiency is quite important. And on this segment, click here on this video, we talk about that and many more details. Now, onto my EG4 door. It runs a D16A6 that's cammed with a PM7 and a webcam from Bisimoto. It's all the intake that I wanted to show you guys, and you can see I haven't smoothed it out, but it's the same intake, and you can click here for this and study it and understand the goal of our design. And it's still about pushing the volumetric efficiency higher. And here, the reason why the intake is kind of slanted is because we're running a throttle and a throttle body spacer to kind of increase plenum volume. And we're studying on that, and we'll let you guys know our findings when it comes to that, and you can see the intake has no bondo, so it's still rough, but it gets smooth when it's finished or when I'm done with it. Oh yeah, and you can also click here for the velocity stack slash ram air design that we did or we talked about in the video, and gives you more ideas. It's about volumetric efficiency and having good top end. And yes, we all want that, right? And so hopefully this gives you a better understanding on how important the dyno graph or the torque curve is, not just the numbers or horsepower numbers, and also to see the difference between the ITR 47 tranny and the ITR 44, and also understand how intricate engine builds are. I mean, you can follow all the parts that we used, but the volumetric efficiency of how what you guys build may be different from what I do, and therefore we always get an advantage for being faster for the same parts or the same setup.